In Willow Creek, a quiet town where rules were supposed to create order but often only created conflict, I lived on a ranch that had been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather had built it from nothing, turning rough land into fertile pastures, and my father had preserved it with blood, sweat, and years of sacrifice. For me, this land was more than property. It was my identity, my home, and my promise to keep the family legacy alive. Every morning I rose with the sun, fed the cattle, checked the fences, and stood proud knowing that my family's work still lived in every acre. I thought I was safe from the constant control battles of the local homeowners association, because my ranch sat just outside their neatly trimmed neighborhoods where lawns had to be an exact height and house colors needed to be pre-approved by a committee. I thought distance protected me, but I was wrong. The HOA, led by none other than the infamous Karen Whitmore, had bigger plans that didn't stop at their own borders. It began with orange survey flags, fluttering in the breeze across the edge of my land. At first, I thought maybe the county was doing a project, maybe repairing something by the road. But then I noticed the flags creeping deeper into my pastures, cutting across grazing lines and irrigation areas. I asked the workers what they were doing, and their answer nearly knocked the breath out of me. "We're laying a water pipeline. Who ordered it? Approved by the county." My stomach twisted. "A pipeline through my ranch? Without permission?" I told them to stop immediately, but they just waved paperwork at me and said it was all legal. I hadn't signed a thing, and I knew it was trespassing, but the HOA had influence, and that meant the county officials looked the other way. A few days later, Karen herself arrived in her shiny black SUV, stepping out like a queen surveying her kingdom. "You should be honored," she said smugly. "Your land will now serve a greater purpose. The whole neighborhood is expanding, and we need more water. Your ranch is perfectly placed for our new line." I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles went white. "This is my land. You had no right." She gave me a smile that dripped with arrogance. "The right comes from power, and the HOA has plenty of it. You can fight if you want, but this is happening." I should have expected nothing less. The following weeks were chaos. Heavy machinery roared through my fields. Fences were ripped down. Trenches split the earth open like scars across the land my family had built with their own hands. Pipes as wide as barrels were lowered into the trenches, welded together, and buried under the soil that once grew my best hay. My cattle scattered in fear. My irrigation system was severed, and the peace of the ranch was shattered. I stood there powerless, seething, as my heritage was ripped apart in the name of HOA progress. But what Karen didn't know, or what the entire HOA didn't know, was that my grandfather had not only built this ranch, he had secured something far more powerful: water rights. Decades earlier, when the Willow Creek River was still considered little more than a farmer's stream, he had purchased and registered rights to an upstream section of land where the river pooled naturally into a spring-fed basin. That spot was the true source of water the HOA pipeline depended on. The land had sat untouched for years, because my ranch had its own wells, but the deed was still in my possession, sealed, signed, and legally binding. They had trespassed on my land to build a pipeline that relied entirely on water I owned. The irony made me laugh for the first time in weeks. Instead of fighting them in court, where their influence would drag me into endless battles, I decided to use their arrogance against them. Quietly, I contacted an engineering company. We built a small dam upstream, diverting the water into large storage reservoirs on my own property. My cattle drank freely, my fields thrived, and the ranch finally felt alive again. But the intake valve for the hose pipeline, it sat bone dry, like a useless piece of metal stuck in the dirt. It didn't take long for panic to ripple through the neighborhood. 2 days after the dam was finished, faucets sputtered and died, lawns began to turn brown, sprinklers refused to start. The people in the HOA community were furious. "Where's our water?" they shouted at board meetings. And Karen, for once, had no answer. She stormed back to my ranch, her face red with fury, her voice shrill. "What did you do? The whole system is dry, the neighborhood is out of water, kids can't shower, lawns are dying, pools are empty." I leaned against my fence, arms folded, calm as could be. I exercised my rights. "This water belongs to me. My grandfather secured it. I have the deed right here. You built your precious pipeline on stolen ground, and now it's useless. She tried to bluff. "That's illegal. You'll regret this." But when I showed her the documents, stamped and signed decades ago, her confidence cracked. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. News spread quickly. Residents who once praised the HOA's leadership now cursed Karen's name. At emergency meetings, they demanded answers. Trucks began hauling in bottled water just to keep people alive. The board tried threatening me with lawsuits, but every lawyer they hired admitted the truth. Water rights are ironclad. My ranch thrived while the neighborhood suffered. My pastures grew greener than ever. My cattle drank freely, and I finally felt like justice had been served. Weeks passed, and the crisis deepened. Yards turned brown, gardens withered, swimming pools stood empty, and angry residents gathered outside Karen's house with signs demanding her resignation. The once all-powerful HOA president was suddenly powerless, cornered by her own arrogance. And then came the sweetest moment of all. Karen showed up at my gate, not in her shiny SUV, but on foot, looking broken, desperate, and defeated. "Please," she whispered, "just turn the water back on. We'll pay. Whatever you want, we'll pay. The neighborhood is falling apart, and everyone blames me. I can't survive this." I studied her face, remembering the way she smirked when she said I should be honored, the way she dismissed my ranch as little and unimportant. "You trespassed. You destroyed my land. You disrespected everything my family built. And now you want mercy?" She nodded, tears threatening to spill. But I shook my head slowly. "No deal. You made your choice. Now you live with it." She begged, pleaded, even offered money under the table. But I refused. The deed was mine, the water was mine, and I wasn't about to give it back to the very people who had trampled over my family's legacy. Eventually, the HOA collapsed under its own weight. Karen was forced to resign in disgrace. The pipeline, once their pride, was dug up and removed. The new leadership admitted their mistakes and offered reparations for the damage to my ranch, but I didn't need them. I had already won. Now, every morning when I walk out to see my cattle drinking from the reservoirs, I smile, because I know the truth. They thought they could control me, but in the end, I controlled everything that mattered: the water, the land, and their future. And in Willow Creek, people still whisper about the rancher who cut off an entire neighborhood by owning the one thing no one can live without.